There is an old saying among those who walk the long grass prairies. The most dangerous creature in the forest is not the wolf, not the bear, and not the silent mountain lion crouching low in the shadows. The most dangerous creature is the one who smiles too wide and offers help too quickly. Long before your grandfather's grandfather drew his first breath, a rabbit learned this truth the hard way, and the mark of his greed has never left him. This is the story of how envy hollowed out a heart, and how the ancient forest answered with a justice as quiet and final as snow. In the long ago time, when the rivers still whispered the names of the first animals, and the trees leaned together at night to trade their oldest secrets, there lived a rabbit at the edge of a wide and silver creek. He was not a terrible creature, not at first. He ate clover in the mornings and slept beneath the roots of an old cottonwood when the afternoon grew warm. But Rabbit carried within him a hunger that clover could never fill, a restlessness that no soft root could quiet. It was the hunger of a heart that measured itself not by what it held, but by what others had been given. On this particular morning, he sat very still at the bank of the creek, a sprig of clover forgotten between his teeth, his amber eyes fixed on the far side of the water where Otter moved through the shallows. Otter was gliding. That is the only true word for it. He moved through the cold water and over the mossy stones with a grace that made the world seem to slow and hold its breath. And the reason every creature in the forest paused to watch him was not merely that he was graceful. It was his coat. Otter's fur was something the morning light seemed to fall in love with. Dark as rich river bottom earth, smooth as still water at dusk, it caught every ray that touched it and returned something deeper and more luminous than simple shine. The elder elk had praised it beside the autumn fires. The meadowlark sang of it in spring, and Rabbit, sitting alone with his forgotten clover, felt something old and poisonous uncurl slowly inside his chest, the way a root-bound weed uncurls when it finally finds a crack in stone. He wanted that coat, not to admire it, not to be near it, but to own it, to wear it, to stand in the place where Otter stood and feel the world's eyes settle on him instead. The want inside Rabbit did not stay quiet for long. It never does, in creatures whose vanity has been allowed to go unfed. By the time the sun had climbed to the middle of its long arc, Rabbit had turned the wanting over and shaped it into something that looked, from the outside, like a plan. He smoothed his ears back with his forepaws. He arranged his face into an expression of warm and easy friendliness, the kind that costs nothing and means less. Then he hopped along the bank of the creek until he reached the place where Otter sat drying himself on a flat, sun-warmed stone. "Greetings, my sleek friend," Rabbit said, and his voice was smooth as the stones beneath shallow water. Otter looked up with his honest brown eyes and blinked slowly, the way gentle creatures blink without suspicion, without arithmetic behind the gaze. "Greetings, Rabbit," Otter said. "You look as though you carry good news." Rabbit settled back on his haunches and let the pause breathe between them, a practiced pause, the kind a storyteller uses when he wants you to lean in. "News of great importance," Rabbit said at last. "Word has come down from the high places. The Great Spirit calls a council, and all animals are summoned to attend. A gathering unlike any held in many seasons." Otter's ears lifted. He was the sort of creature who believed in such things, believed in councils and gatherings and the weight of communal obligation, because he had never been given reason to doubt the intentions of others. But there is one difficulty, Rabbit continued, his voice dropping to a tone of comfortable conspiracy. To reach the place where the council meets, we must travel through the valley and camp overnight at the River of Hot Stones. It is a long journey to make alone, and I thought perhaps we might travel together, you and I, as neighbors and as friends. Otter agreed, as Rabbit had known he would. Kindness is its own kind of trust, and Otter had never learned to close the door that his warmth kept open. They set out that same afternoon, moving together through the long golden grasses as the sun leaned westward and the shadows stretched out long and cool behind every stone and root. Rabbit talked almost without pausing, filling the air between them with pleasant small talk, pointing out landmarks, asking gentle questions, laughing at small things. All the industry of a creature making sure the one beside him does not grow quiet enough to think. They reached the river bank as dark came down across the land like a slow-drawn curtain. Together, they built a fire, and the red light of it touched the water and made the stones around them glow like embers of an older, larger fire long since gone to ash. Otter was at peace. He stretched himself near the warmth, his beautiful coat catching the firelight and holding it. Rabbit sat across from him, adding sticks to the flame, and behind his easy expression, something cold and calculating was rehearsing its next movement. He began to look up at the sky with increasing frequency. He would tilt his long face upward, let his nose work, and then look quickly back at the fire with the studied expression of an animal mastering fear. After the third time, Otter noticed. "Is something wrong?" Otter asked. Rabbit looked at him for a long moment with something designed to pass as reluctance. "I did not want to worry you," Rabbit said softly. "But the wind carries a warning tonight. When the wind smells this way, of iron and old heat, it means the sky is preparing to throw its burning flints down upon the earth before morning. It is a rare and terrible thing. I have seen it only once before, and those who did not know what to do suffered greatly for their ignorance." Otter sat up slowly, his dark eyes moving to the sky, searching its deep and depthless dark for whatever Rabbit claimed was gathering there. The stars looked as they always looked, cold and still and distant, indifferent as ancient stone. But Otter was honest, and honest creatures often mistake the confidence of liars for knowledge, because a creature who has never built a lie cannot easily see the architecture of one. "Burning flints," Otter repeated, turning the phrase over as if weighing it. "What should we do then? Should we turn back?" Rabbit shook his head with a gravity perfected by long rehearsal in the theater of his own ambition. "There is no outrunning it," Rabbit said. "When the sky decides to open, it opens everywhere at once. No, the only true protection is the river itself. Deep water will stop even the sharpest flint." He let that sit for a moment, watching Otter absorb it, watching the honest fear take hold in those brown eyes. Then, as though the thought had only just occurred to him, casual as a leaf falling from a branch, Rabbit added, "Of course, when the flints begin to fall, you will need to move quickly. There is no time to hesitate. I will call out the warning the moment I see the first one. When I call out, you must go into the river immediately, straight to the deepest channel where the current is cold and strong." He paused, and his eyes drifted slowly, pointedly, to Otter's coat. "You will want to leave your fur coat here on the bank before you dive. Weight will drag you down, and the deep channel demands everything from a swimmer. Better to sacrifice the coat than your life." Otter looked down at himself, at the coat that had been his since birth, the coat that the morning light loved and every animal had praised, and he trusted the words of the creature sitting across the fire from him, because trust was the only language his heart had ever learned to speak. The night deepened. The fire burned lower. Otter, lulled by the warmth and the long journey and the easy rhythm of his own good conscience, fell into sleep the way only truly gentle creatures sleep, fully, quietly, without one guarding corner of the mind kept awake against the dark. Rabbit did not sleep. Rabbit sat in the dwindling firelight with his eyes open and his mind moving through the final paces of what he had planned, checking each step the way a hunter checks the ground for loose stones before he moves. When Otter's breathing had settled into the slow and regular rhythm of deep sleep, Rabbit rose without sound. He moved to the fire, which had burned down to a bed of bright coals, and chose from the ground nearby a long green branch, still supple with sap, one that would not catch and burn but would flex in return. He positioned himself carefully, with the calculated precision of a creature who has thought this through in waking dreams for hours, and he brought the branch down hard across the heart of the coals. A great fountain of sparks erupted into the night air, red and gold and copper, spinning upward like a scattered constellation suddenly flung loose from the sky, and a curtain of them descended in a wide arc, landing among the grasses, on the stones, near the sleeping shape of Otter's flank. Before the last ember had settled, Rabbit filled his lungs and let loose a sound designed to crack the membrane of a dream. Flint, flint. The sky is falling. The burning flints are here. Into the river now. Otter's eyes opened into the red-speckled dark, and what he saw there confirmed every word Rabbit had spoken beside the fire. The air was full of falling light. Small burning points were settling on the grass around him, on the stones, some still tracing their slow arcs downward from above, exactly as a rain of fiery flints might look if one had never seen. A rain of fiery flints, and had no frame with which to read the difference between an ancient terror and a branch struck across a bed of coals. There was no time for thought, because thought requires the kind of stillness that fear burns away. There was only the instruction remembered from the fire, the voice of the one who had warned him, and the body's own ancient knowledge that the river was right there, close and deep and saving. Otter slipped out of his coat the way a creature slips out of the one garment it has worn since birth, without ceremony, without understanding that this is the last moment of something. He laid the coat on the grass in a single smooth movement, drew himself to his full length, and entered the river in a long, clean arc, the way only otter can enter water, without noise, without disturbance. A dark shape swallowed by a darker shape, sinking straight down through the cold layers until the surface light became a distant shimmer above him and the deep channel had him in its grip. And the world above was silent and indifferent and very far away. Rabbit did not wait. Waiting was for creatures who harbored doubt, and in this moment, Rabbit harbored nothing but the simple, singing certainty of desire about to be satisfied. He crossed to where the coat lay on the grass, still holding the shape of Otter's body, still warm from the heat of the creature who had worn it through all the seasons of his life. Rabbit gathered it up. He held it for just a moment, and the firelight caught it and turned it to something very close to glory. Dark and deep and luminous, more beautiful up close than it had ever been from the far bank of the creek where envy had first learned its dimensions. He pulled it over himself. It was too large, as he had known it would be, falling loose around his shoulders, dragging slightly at the edges, the sleeves of some other creature's inheritance hanging past his own small forepaws. But Rabbit pulled it close and told himself it would settle, that it would come to fit him, that the world did not know yet who this coat truly belonged to, but would learn. Then he turned to the dark line of the forest at the water's edge and hopped into it, and the trees closed behind him, the way trees close behind everyone who enters them with something that isn't theirs, quietly, without judgment, recording everything. Otter stayed deep for a long time. He was patient in the way river creatures are patient, sustained by cold water, and the knowledge that patience is the most reliable shelter the natural world offers. When at last he rose, slow and vertical, through the dark layers of the river, and his head broke the surface into the cool of the night, the first thing he understood was that the fire had gone out. The second thing he understood was silence, a silence without warning, without the sound of falling fire, without the voice of any creature calling alarm. He swam to shore and stood dripping on the stones, and the cold of the night air found him immediately, found every part of him that the river had touched, which was all of him, which was everything, and the cold settled in like a guest who has not been invited and does not intend to leave. He looked at the grass where his coat had been. He looked at the dead fire. He looked at the place where Rabbit had been sitting, and then at the dark forest beyond, and the understanding moved through him slowly, the way cold moves through stone, not quickly, not with drama, but with a depth and a finality that leaves nothing untouched. He had been tricked. The sky had not thrown its burning flints. There was no council. There was no great spirit calling animals together in the valley. There was only a rabbit with wanting in his heart and a plan old as selfishness itself. And Otter, who had never built a lie in his life, had walked into it as trustingly as a deer walks into still water, because he had not known that the world contained such architecture. Morning came the way mornings always come after long and sleepless nights, too bright, too clear, with a light that illuminates everything that darkness allowed to stay soft and uncertain. Word traveled, as word does in the forests and the meadows, moving from one creature to the next through the invisible channels that connect all living things who share a territory and a sky. By midday, the great animal council had gathered, not the imaginary council Rabbit had invented by the fire, but the real one, the one that meets in the high meadow beneath the old grandfather tree, the one where Bear presides and every voice carries weight. Otter arrived with nothing but the night's chill still in his bones, and the truth of what had happened carried plainly in his face, because honest creatures cannot hide what has been done to them. It shows in the way they hold themselves. Rabbit arrived later, and he arrived as Rabbit had dreamed of arriving, striding into the open meadow with Otter's coat settled on his shoulders, his chin lifted, his eyes moving across the assembled animals with an expression designed to receive the admiration he had spent the whole dark journey imagining. The animals looked at him, and then they looked at Otter, sitting quietly beside Bear, and then back at Rabbit, and the arithmetic was simple and immediate. Bear, who had been chief of the council longer than most trees had been standing, turned his great dark eyes on Rabbit, and the sound that came from him was not a roar exactly. It was something older and heavier than a roar, a sound that the earth itself seemed to lean into, a sound that said without any words at all that the patience of the just has finally reached its boundary and the time for accounting has arrived. Rabbit ran. He was fast, as rabbits are fast, the muscles of his long hind legs firing in their ancient and mechanical perfection, his body flattening low to the ground with every bound, the stolen coat streaming behind him like a banner of everything wrong he had done. But Otter's coat had not been made for a rabbit's body. It dragged. It caught. At the edges it trailed along the grass and tangled at his feet, and vanity, which had dressed him so boldly in another creature's beauty, now became the snare that closed around his own stride. He was midway across the meadow when the coat caught beneath his left hind paw at the precise moment that paw reached forward for its landing, and Rabbit went down, fast and hard and without any grace at all, straight into the heart of a briar patch that had been growing at the meadow's edge in quiet patience, as briar patches do, waiting for exactly this kind of moment. The animals retrieved the coat. They lifted it carefully from the brambles and carried it back to Otter, who received it with a gratitude that was quiet and without theater, the gratitude of someone who has learned something difficult about the world but has chosen not to let the learning make him cold. Rabbit was brought before Bear, and the briars had left their mark on him, a deep split at the center of his upper lip, and Bear looked at him for a long time with something in his eyes that was not anger anymore. Anger had finished its work, but something harder and more final. An elder who had watched the whole proceeding from the shadow of the grandfather tree spoke then, in the way elders speak, without hurry, without the need to perform. "Stealing another's beauty," she said, "will only make you trip over your own greed." And the split in Rabbit's lip stayed with him. It was not a punishment exactly, not in the way a punishment is handed down. It was simply the truth of what had happened, written in the only place that could not be shed, carried forward into every generation that followed, so that every rabbit who has ever sat at the edge of a creek and felt the first stirring of wanting what belongs to another might look in the still water and find, already there, the mark of the lesson waiting to be understood. In the ancient folklore of the open prairie, the trickster's tale has always served as a mirror. Rabbit's envy was not merely a desire for beautiful fur. It was the oldest human hunger, the belief that wearing another's gifts might make us worthy of the admiration we crave. But what we take without earning does not fit us. It drags. It catches at our feet precisely when we are moving fastest, when we are most certain we have gotten away with something. Otter's loss reminds us that kindness and trust, though they may be exploited, are never truly the weakness. The weakness belongs to the creature who must destroy in order to feel sufficient. And the briar bush does not distinguish between the clever and the foolish. It simply waits. If this story settled something quiet in you tonight, leave a like or share it with someone who could use a gentle reminder that the forest keeps its own accounts. For every story in this series, completely free of interruptions, you can find us on Patreon and Spotify, where the nights are long and the old tales never run out.